"We'll grow old together," he whispered, our fingers laced on a winter night. The kind of night when the city lights look like they're shivering. His breath warmed the space between us. "No matter what happens, I promise." I said nothing. At first, I just watched the white fog of our breaths dissolve and imagined to people like us, years from now, a little softer around the edges. A little kinder because time had taught us where to stop hurting each other. When I finally answered, my voice sounded like I was trying not to scare a bird. "Okay," I said. "I'll believe you. I tell you this because every story has an opening door, and mine opened with a promise." I wish I could say I made him keep it. I couldn't. Back then I worked the early shift at the coffee shop on Willow Street. It always smelled like burnt caramel and wet wool. People came in with sleep still clinging to their faces, pulling their coats tighter, looking for permission to start the day. He was one of them for months. Ryan, always sitting near the window, reading the same dog-eared paperback so many times I could tell where his thumbs rested. He had this easy smile that made you think he'd been forgiven for something you didn't know about. He started staying till my break. Then he started staying until my shift ended. He'd walk me to the bus stop and tell me I had weather eyes, the kind that knew when rain was coming before anyone else felt it. It sounded silly, but at 24 I wanted someone to see something unusual in me. He did. Or maybe he was just good at saying things that felt like a soft blanket. I didn't ask which. We learned each other in small rooms and on cheap couches. The first year we had no money, but we had private jokes that made people look over in restaurants. He kept receipts like he was collecting proof that our life was happening. When his mother got sick, I learned to sleep in hospital chairs. When my father died, he ironed my black dress without asking. There are 100 tiny ways love makes itself known. I can still list them, as if a list could resurrect anything. The job at Westport Marketing came later. After all the applications and the online courses I did at night while Ryan pretended to read but actually watched me. Like he could lean close, enough to help me understand budgets and KP is just by breathing them in. When I got the call, he lifted me and spun me like we were in a movie set in a world where rent is inexpensive and neighbors don't mind noise. We opened a cheap bottle of champagne and toasted with mismatched mugs because that was what we had. "This is it," he said. "This is the start." On my first day I wore a blouse I couldn't afford and shoes that made my toes whisper threats. The office was all glass and soft carpet, like walking through a museum that also sent emails. My boss, Claire Adams, had the kind of presence that made the room hold its breath for her. She was early 30s, precise, gentle when she wanted to be, frightening when she didn't. Her laugh came out in measured portions, like perfume. People paid attention to how she placed her hands on a table. I did too. I wanted her to like me. I think I wanted to become a little bit of her. Someone who could walk into a meeting with unearned calm and leave with everyone believing the day had been her idea. She said she valued clarity and grace. I wrote those words on a sticky note and kept it inside my notebook where no one could see how badly I needed instructions. For a while, it worked. I stayed late, volunteered for the projects other people avoided, sent Claire bullet point updates that pretended my heart never raced. I learned that if you speak slowly, people think you know more than you do. I learned the difference between a no and a not yet. At home, I practiced presentations out loud while Ryan cooked pasta and corrected the parts where I looked down. He'd kiss my forehead like punctuation. "You were born for this," he'd say. I wasn't, but I wanted to be. The holiday party came in December, a week of rain that made the city look like a photograph left out in the sink. I brought Ryan because I wanted them to see the person who made me braver. He wore the only suit he owned and looked like a prom night he never had. The music was too loud for the size of the room. Claire wore a silk dress, the color of a storm, and greeted him like he was already in the middle of a conversation. She'd been waiting to finish. Her hand stayed in his a second longer than politeness required. I noticed it the way you notice an off note in a song you otherwise love quietly, privately, convincing yourself it wasn't enough to ruin anything. Ryan laughed a little too easily at her joke about brand archetypes. She told him she liked People who did things with their hands. People who could fix broken chairs and make shelves stay level. He said he liked people who could speak a language that made numbers behave. They smiled. The lights were warm and flattering. I decided to file the moment under instances of me being overly sensitive and moved on. The first real crack was so small, I'm ashamed at how long I kept stepping over it. Ryan started taking networking calls. He used my moisturizer because it made his skin look less tired. He said we should save separately in case one of us wants to surprise the other. At work, Claire began mirroring my phrases in meetings and arranging them in her mouth like she'd invented them. She started asking if I could swing by early just to set the tone. I came earlier. I left later. I became a person whose friends stopped inviting her because they already knew the answer. Then there were the events. Industry panels, cocktail things with toothpicks and words like synergy said without irony. Claire would say, "Bring Ryan if he wants to come," in a way that actually meant, "Bring Ryan. I'd like to see him." I remember a rooftop one-string lights, a view that made people lean against the railing like they were trying to touch the horizon. When Claire arrived, she found Ryan before she found me. I took a step toward them, and then another. And then I stopped because they looked so absorbed. I didn't want to be the woman who interrupted a conversation she wasn't invited to. That's another thing I learned. Betrayal rehearses itself in these gentle, almost polite moments. The night it really began unspooling. I came home early with a headache shaped like a ring around my skull. The apartment was dark except for the kitchen light, the one we left on when we wanted the place to look like it was waiting for us. I heard voices, his and another woman's, wide awake and close. For a breathless second I thought, Claire. Here. But the voice was on a speakerphone. "We'll circle back on the board's feedback," the woman said. Claire. The name turned the air thinner. Ryan leaned on the counter, smiling into the phone like light was coming out of it. When he saw me, he pressed a button and said too brightly, "Hey, you're home." My mouth filled with static. "You were talking to Claire." "Just a quick thing," he said. "She wanted my thoughts on a pitch idea. From, a customer perspective." "You're not a customer, you're my boyfriend." He raised his hands like I'd thrown something. "It's not like that. She respects my opinion." I wanted to say, "She's my boss. Respect me," but I didn't. I nodded and ate toast I didn't want. Because that was the kind of peace I knew how to keep. After that, the phone calls multiplied. He started styling his hair in the mirror with the careful concentration of a man trying to look like he hadn't tried. He bought a navy blazer that made him look like he had stories about boats. He began to say sentences that sounded focus grouped. "I just want us both to be our best selves. Maybe some distance is actually healthy. I need to explore my potential." I didn't know where he learned them. I had a guess. I kept hoping evidence would fail to appear. Instead, it kept arriving right on time. The receipts he used to save vanished. He left his phone face down. He smiled at texts and then sighed like life was heavy but meaningful. I started sleeping badly, so I learned the soft sounds our apartment made at 3 a.m. The refrigerator's click. The faucet's small throat clearing. As if the place were clearing space for a sorrow it knew was coming. One afternoon Claire asked me to stay. A few minutes after our weekly check-in, she perched on the edge of the conference table, as if she were resting on the last line of a poem. "You've been doing excellent work," she said in a tone that was usually followed by a new assignment. "I want to make sure you feel valued." "I do," I said, which was partly true. "Thank you. You're a natural at shepherding clients," she continued, "and I can tell you're a loyal person. That's rare." The word loyal tied a careful knot inside me. I scanned her face for either generosity or malice and found a version of both. "Is there something you want me to know?" I asked. Not recognizing my own voice, she smiled, but not with her eyes. "Only that I see you." She gathered her papers and left me with the echo of that awful sentence, "I see you." People say that when they are too polite to say the real thing. "I see what you don't want to see." The announcement. Because that's what it was, arrived 2 months later, like a weather alert I had foolishly turned off. Ryan came over with a paper bag of groceries we didn't need. There were roses on top, the kind you buy when you want the bouquet to do most of the speaking. He set them on the counter and faced me like a man who had chosen his bravery because it would look good in retrospect. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Okay," I answered, "not okay at all. I didn't mean for this to happen." He swallowed. "Claire and I, we've been seeing each other." My body discovered new ways to be cold. The refrigerator hummed kindly, like it was trying to be a friend. "You're telling me you're cheating on me with my boss." "It's not," he stopped. "It's more complicated than that." "No," I said, "it's exactly that." He talked then about connection and timing and how sometimes you meet someone who reflects the future back to you in a way you can't ignore. He said he hadn't planned it. He said he'd wanted to tell me sooner, but he respected me too much to lie, as if the timing of truth could dress it in better clothes. At one point, he actually reached for my hand. I looked at it like it was a small animal I'd once rescued and now didn't recognize. "When were you going to end it?" I asked. His mouth opened, closed. "We were going to tell you together," he said. And that was somehow the ugliest sentence I had ever heard. "Get out," I said, and my voice was so calm I almost believed I was fine. After he left, I stood very still in the kitchen and listened to the air try to settle around me. It couldn't. I swept the roses into the trash, watched the petals land like a soft red sound, and then I sat on the tile floor because it was cold enough to keep me from unraveling. I didn't cry then. That came later. First came the strangest sensation, relief, like shape finally matching shadow. Then the grief rose, and I let it, because fighting water is how you drown. I didn't go to work the next day, or the next. I told HR I was sick with something unnamed and highly contagious. It wasn't a lie. Claire didn't call. She didn't email. A week later, a company-wide message appeared with the subject line "Personal News," and there it was. Claire and Ryan were engaged. "Excited for this next chapter," she wrote. I looked at the words until they stopped meaning anything, and then I closed my laptop because closing things was all I could do. People ask later how you keep breathing through something like that. You don't. You hold your breath for days. And then one morning you drink water and it tastes like water again. You do small, orderly tasks, the dishes, the laundry, the mail, and let them be a structure big enough to stand inside while your heart looks for a new apartment. You stop rehearsing what you'll say if you see them together and start rehearsing how to keep walking. The day I resigned, the sky was the clear kind that makes you feel like you have to be honest. I packed my desk slowly, saying goodbye to the version of me who thought competence was a weatherproof coat. I left my badge on Claire's empty chair and took the stairs because elevators felt like a favor I hadn't earned. On the street, the city went on performing indifference. I admired it for that. Healing looked ridiculous at first. I went to a pottery class and made a bowl even a generous person would call asymmetrical. I learned how to poach an egg like it was a degree. I deleted the photos that told a story that didn't exist anymore, but kept a few because I'm the sort of person who believes the past has a right to its own room. I made new playlists and walked new streets and discovered I could survive an entire day without thinking of them more than 8 times. Eventually, I found freelance clients who didn't care about my history, only about deadlines. I wrote copy for small brands that felt less like work and more like speaking on behalf of kinder strangers. I slept better. I bought fresh flowers and kept them alive. I remembered the sound of my own laugh, not the private, practiced one, but the one made for surprising myself. Months later, I saw them in the wild, as if the city had decided it was time for the obligatory scene. It was a Sunday afternoon. Cafe windows open, light the color of forgiveness. They sat near the door, Claire with her perfect posture, Ryan with a face that had learned new worries. His hair had grown out in a way that looked both deliberate and tired. She was talking, and he was nodding as if he were a background actor in the scene of his own life. They didn't see me. I could have left. Instead, I stood a second longer than necessary and took a quiet inventory. Did seeing them still punch through my ribs? A little. Did it own me? No. I felt the gentlest of sadnesses, like visiting a house where you used to live, and noticing the tree in the yard finally grew into the shape you predicted. Good for it, you think, and then you go home. Home now is smaller but softer. I have fewer things but more quiet. I keep my promises to myself, like I'm the only authority on what I need. When people ask if I'm open to dating, I say yes in a tone that means I'm not holding auditions, just leaving the door unlocked. I no longer worship at the altar of potential. I believe in ordinary kindness like a religion. Every so often, I think about the promise he made on that winter night we'll grow old together, and I picture us the way he said it. Two people softening, finding new ways not to hurt each other. Maybe there's a version of our lives where that's true, but this is the one I'm living. And in this one, forever was a word he threw like confetti because it looked pretty. Not because he wanted to sweep it up afterward. If you're listening and you've been left behind for someone who outranked you in the office, in the family, in the hierarchy of desire, I won't tell you time heals everything. It doesn't. It just gives you new rooms to stand in while the broken ones air out. I won't tell you you'll find someone better. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll find yourself instead, and she will be worth the entire ordeal. I still keep a sticky note in my notebook. It used to say clarity and grace. Now it says, choose the life that chooses you back. Some mornings I underline it. Some mornings I don't need to. Most mornings I make coffee, water my ridiculous crooked bowl of succulents, and look out at a city I'm learning how to love in a language I taught myself. The language where forever doesn't mean I promise. It means I show up. Last week I got an email from a former coworker. Did you hear? It began, which is how bad news likes to make an entrance. Claire had stepped down, burnout, restructuring, the polite chorus. The note included a photo of the team at a farewell lunch. Ryan appeared at the edge of the frame, eyes on something outside the picture. I looked at it for a heartbeat, then closed the message. Not with triumph, just with the deep, ordinary relief of not needing to read to the end. Sometimes people ask if I regret believing him. I don't. A promise is a mirror. You see the shape of your hope in it. I'm not embarrassed that I wanted a life I could count on. I'm not ashamed that I waited on a doorstep that turned out to belong to someone else. What I learned is simpler. If someone wants you to stand still while they walk toward a future that doesn't include you, let them go without calling after them. Your voice deserves better echoes. Tonight, the apartment is quiet except for the sound of rain. The kind that softens edges and convinces the world to sleep an hour earlier. I make tea. I open the window. Somewhere, a couple is telling the truth to each other, and choosing to keep doing it. Somewhere else, a person is making a promise they mean and will keep, even when it gets inconvenient. I wish them well. I wish him well too, in a detached, civic kind of way. But mostly, I wish me well. And I am finally the person who can grant that wish. If he ever passes me on the street, and maybe he will, because cities like to curate coincidences, I know what I'll do. I'll nod, as if acknowledging a former classmate. I won't slow down. I won't speed up. I'll keep moving toward whatever is next. Hands empty, heart not armored, but awake. He promised me forever. He gave it to someone else. I gave myself back to myself. And somehow, that turned out to be the longest promise worth keeping.